So a lot of people have asked this question of me: what are some of the best books to get started on 40k? And there's a good reason to make this short video now, with so many people having unplanned extra time on their hands. Additionally, right now, if you're quick, because we're heading into the end of what is a big 40k Humble ebook bundle. These 40k Humble sales often come up, but this one is actually especially good because it is not just covering the usual suspects that tend to appear, such as Horus Heresy Classics, with a couple of other bits and pieces. I'll talk a little bit more about that Humble at the end of the video, but basically it's a really good one. Now, the most obvious reason people may ask what are the right books to get started in 40k, and this is something I get asked constantly, is that it can of course be a very daunting prospect for anybody as a newcomer to what is a very complex, sprawling galaxy of horror. The 40k verse is attracting more people all the time, and rightly so, because it's one of the most imaginative and addictive fictional verses to get involved in. It's personally also truly amazing to see something that I started playing as a kid, now some, let's say 20 years ago, be where it is now, and even more amazing that I find myself discussing it here for you. My standard statement when asked where do I begin in learning about 40k, choose anywhere. Now this seems like a very lazy cop-out answer, and don't worry, I'll give you some proper starters in a moment, but it's really not a lazy cop-out answer. The reason I say to people you can start anywhere is that 40k has simply become so massive at this point in terms of its background material that if you're coming at it absolutely fresh, maybe having just watched a few lore videos, played a video game, talked about it with friends, seen a beginner guide, and now you want to dive on in, it in all honesty probably doesn't matter where you choose to start, because you're not going to have the full picture anyway. So it's like trying to get in on a complex show when everybody else has already been watching it, because there's going to be considerable bits of the story you can't know until you learn more in general about just what's going on. And that's fine, because you know that you have to persevere and eventually just trust that all those pieces are going to fall into place, which they will. And it's often like that with 40k, or indeed any complex fictional verse. You just have to jump in and know that you're going to figure it out in time. With all that said, if you pushed me to advise where to begin, as we will do today, I would have to say that often when I do some quick searches about where to begin, if I Google where to start in 40k, always the same safe suggestions. Usually that means stuff like 40k Classics as a starting point, big names from the Heresy series, stuff like Mechanicum, Horus Rising, all these kind of things, you know, and that's fine. But with some more thought, as I will explain shortly, I wouldn't suggest these myself as a starting place. Another common question is chronology. Should I read things in order? I think this is again totally subjective, although I guess from just a straight ordered sense, it's going to make some sense to read things in an order. That's always going to be true. However, for myself, it is not something I care about. The order that I read things in just doesn't matter to me at all. But then again, I'm not the kind of person that gets bothered by spoilers either. But my thinking for this is the same reasons I already stated, that 40k is so vast. I really feel like when I'm reading about 40k stuff, material, new or old, whatever, I'm just not concerned if it came before or after or where or who it's involved. To me, it's all just pieces of a big puzzle. And once I've consumed that information, I'll arrange it or I'll put it to the side until it fits in later. You know, sometimes I'll even need to go back and look at it again to make sure I get it in the right place and understand it. So when I think about recommending anything for true newcomers, I consider it much like making a usable YouTube tutorial, in the sense that a disturbing amount of YouTube tutorials for almost any subject, my vague guess is that about 90% of these are just completely unwatchable. And this is most commonly because the person giving the advice is ignoring a pretty key factor, that if you're doing a tutorial, you're meant to be putting yourself in the place of the person who is new to that material or problem, not advising a person, i.e. themselves, who's already experienced, which is what usually happens. And often that's a big problem when sort of advising people that's new to anything. You have to put your mind in that person instead of just thinking, oh yeah, this is what I would want. Because then that leads to inevitably skipping over critical information. You move too fast, or you just don't consider how to approach something as someone with little to any knowledge about it. So if you're new to a series or a genre, it seems like not the best idea to start with something that is highly specific, like a classic novel, which focuses on like one faction, one event. And it's likely going to be very heavy also on page count, because this will not only be very daunting, not to mention requiring you staying very committed to get through it all. Now, my advice in experience from talking with friends, reading community topics from followers who are big readers, this is not the way to go. Don't dive in with the biggest tome, the biggest series. In fact, you want to go in completely the opposite direction. Start small, start light, build up to the bigger stuff. Seems pretty obvious, right? My last disclaimer for my sanity is that yes, I have chosen options overall that lean towards the Imperium, and that's because most material does lean toward the Imperium. There are sadly not reams of tales about the political intrigue of the Orcs or the inner workings of the Tyranid hives. Remembering also that for most people the Imperium is going to be the gateway to the other horrors. But I'm going to throw out some other choices here that will of course have natural elements about the Xenos, if not actually being about them. So spiel done, let's do the choices. My suggestions are all linked in the notes below in order, so if you want to check out any, you can find them right below this video. So first of all, if you are a true newcomer to 40k, or if you just haven't dived into the literature of 40k yet, my first recommendation is for you to start with a collection of short stories, not a heavy novel. The reason being fairly simple, these are far easier to get through. They're more consumable and will either be enjoyable or, if they're not, easily dismissible. But there really isn't a downside. When I was a kid, I used to read a lot more than I did now, likely because I had vast amounts of time in my hands, but one thing I really enjoyed was short story collections. I devoured these constantly, and because the material is so light on page count for each story, if one is a bust, you don't lose much time invested. Now, what I've heard from friends and from some of you when discussing 40k books, be it on my Discord or elsewhere, is that you can hit a wall of a single novel, and that can really sink you. This has happened to me also many times. You start off into a hefty book, but maybe it's just not capturing your imagination, it's not moving fast enough, or there's just too much detail and it gets kind of like a mire that you have to wade through. But you then also don't feel like you want to abandon it, and then it can become a bit of a millstone around your neck that's stopping you from moving on. So if you were going to choose a first proper heavy novel, it can really be a bit of a minefield. Now of course you can read general reviews and that's going to help, and sure you could just play it safe and say I'm going to start on the Heresy series with book 1, and if that's the way you want to go for it, enjoy the series. However, I think for a beginner, collected short stories are the way to go, and my suggestions are as follows. First of all, Heroes of the Space Marines. The title is fairly self-explanatory and it features an array of short works from really great authors. And there's not much more to say about it than that because it's just collected short works. Another is Crusade, which again features a variety of short stories from 40k authors, some of the more modern material here as well, but still with those authors like Abnett, Dembski-Bowden, Annandale, John French, James Swallow, Gav Thorpe. Now neither of these collections is going to break the bank, but they will give you a quality sample of foundational material that's digestible and a nice introduction to the flavour of 40k. You can think of these short story collections or anthologies as really like a training zone or an appetizer for the rest. Now my other major option for the collection series is There Is Only War. And the description for this one states that across mankind's Imperium battle rages, from the lowly troopers of the Imperial Guard to the elite Space Marines. Humanity's defenders are ever beset by threats. Alien races encroach on the edges of mankind's realm, bringing worlds to ruin with blade, gun and claw. On countless worlds mutated by servants of dark gods that seek to do their master's bidding and bring ruin to all that the Emperor sacrificed himself to build. And in the nightmare realm of the Eye of Terror, the arch-traitors who tore the Imperium apart 10 millennia ago still lurk, plotting their revenge. It's a pretty good generalised statement about 40k, and that's because this collection features 41 stories from the Astartes to the Drukhari, so it's a really good choice to get into for lots of little bits and pieces that are going to whet your appetite. Now I will throw out here as well Lord of the Dark Millennium. This is Dan Abnett's 40k anthology. Now there is a caveat here because this series is focused on Dan's collected short works, however many of these add extra detail and nuance to characters that are featured in well-known series like Eisenhorn. Now, as I said, I personally don't care about chronology, it's all just part and parcel of the miasma of 40k for me. However, if you prefer things to be a little bit more ordered, get through at least the Eisenhorn Trilogy before you come to this. But if you don't care either way, it's Dan Abnett as an author, so it's a solid set of great short works that you will undoubtedly enjoy. And there are many other collected works on Black Library. I'm sure with a mild bit of searching you'll be able to find them. But one other choice to consider, and by the way this need not be just for newcomers, are the novella series. These are again shorter stories covering a wide range of different material from great authors. The novella range are in 2 series, 20 small books in total, usually only numbering about 100 pages, so they're very consumable and readable in an afternoon if you just plough through them. You can buy either of the 2 collections each for £26, or it's £3 each for an individual novella ebook. Now, I would ordinarily for prices do currency conversion, but I'm not doing it now because the rates are just shot to hell and changing all the time, so just check the link and see your local price. But the novellas are absolutely fantastic. Also, if you buy the physical books, they're great for just kind of taking while you travel because they're very lightweight. So anyway, I've really enjoyed the novellas, so that's why I included them here. So then we go on to the middle stage. After some shorter collections, you might want to jump straight into the full-on heresy books, or something else of your choice, right? Well, for sure, if you want to go and pick out something that's appealing to you, be that a factional book, a character, or an event that interests you, and you want to drill down on that, no problem, it's a good way to go. That natural intrigue and appetite is going to keep your attention and help you stay focused on completing the material. And that nicely brings me to my second stage of 40k novels, or indeed any novel, and that is actually finishing it. I think one thing many would agree on is that, based again on my conversations with others over the years, is that it's always very easy to get started in a book. You know, you're excited to get stuck into a new narrative, but that initial enthusiasm and momentum can wear off, and then you're left getting over and through the first third. And sometimes this can be tough, especially if it's a heavier novel big on exposition. But if you can just smash through and get into the meat of the story, then after you get to that stage, it's usually a safe ride to the finish. And this is why I say if you're at a second stage of 40k reading, choose some lighter novels. Things that stand alone or could be part of an ongoing series. And that's not a worry either, because I think generally speaking, most 40k books will work as a standalone, even if they're part of a bigger series. Although, again, as I say, I suppose occasionally there's a chance that there might be the odd weird spoiler character death or whatever in there, but I can't say that it's really ever ruined anything for me. So my first choice here is one that I read very recently, Valdor, Birth of the Imperium. This is a fantastic book on many levels, primarily though because it gives some great insight into the early Imperium. It's set toward the end of the Unification Wars on Terra. The petty warlords and tyrants of Old Earth have been vanquished, and the Emperor's armies are triumphant. But what now of the nascent Imperium and its forgotten soldiers, its thunder warriors and armies of unity? A new force is rising, but change on Terra is seldom bloodless, and for progress to be ensured, darker deeds are necessary. It's a very good read and I highly recommend it, just regardless, but it fits within that category of a kind of more medium book. It's not extensively heavy reading and you should be able to get through it pretty easily. So then we move on to the second choice, and this is part of a series, but I think it works just fine also as a standalone. This is Dark Adeptus. It is a fantastic book dealing with the Grey Knights and ancient Titanic war machines. It might seem an unusual choice, but I think this tale illustrates a lot of interesting elements about 40k, especially in the mystery of discovery and the dark secrets that exist out there about humanity's past. The spiel for the book is that 100 years ago, the forge world of Macharian disappeared amidst rumours of corruption and civil war. Now it has returned, and the once teeming factory planet has become a silent sentinel floating through space. Captain Alaric of the Grey Knights must investigate Macharian and determine if there exists any presence of demonic influence, and if so, to of course terminate it with extreme prejudice. However, nothing can prepare even the Grey Knights for what they find on this planet. Now, as I say, it's part of the Grey Knights series, but I think it works really well just on its own. It's not a heavy book, and it gives some really good insight to different elements in the Imperium and 40k, which I think are all very relevant for newcomers. My third choice in the middle section is something more Xenos, stepping into the world of the Eldar with Gav Thorpe's Path series. Now, this is a 4-book series, but you can read the first installment entirely as a standalone again, should you choose, that first book being Path of the Warrior. This is a great book to begin with because it really helps to define and understand the Eldar. Craftworld Eldar's entire lives revolve around following what is known as a path, a discipline of specific personal nature. So when the artist Corlandril feels the call to war, he abandons peace for the path of the warrior. He becomes a striking scorpion, a deadly fighter skilled in the art of close-quarter combat. As he and his craftworld face battles with the Imperium of Man, he travels deeper into the warrior path, and we see how for the Eldar, the deeper they follow this path, the closer they become to losing all identity and becoming an avatar of war. And this again feeds into a lot of stuff that I've talked about in other videos in terms of the Eldar soul, the way in which their spirit works, and just in general the kind of nature and origin of the Eldar. If it captures your imagination, you might want to also continue the series, which leads me on nicely into part 3, where I'm going to talk now about omnibus books. Now, once you've finished a couple of medium weight books, it's time to either sit down and plough through the Heresy, or perhaps a long series like Gaunt's Ghosts. But I would also suggest to you, consider an omnibus. Now, for those of you who don't know what that is, an omnibus is basically a combined version of multiple narrative arching books. Now, why choose this? Well, firstly, there's usually a good reason why a book series has been collected into an omnibus edition. Likely the books themselves were successful in the community, coupled with not being prohibitively long. And the reason I think an omnibus should be a third step in, or indeed beneficial for anybody starting in the books, is because it offers you multiple positive aspects to keep you hooked in. Firstly, characters that you're going to become familiar with, an expanding story that wants to pull you in, told across multiple books, and importantly, continuity. In 40k, as I said earlier, one of the things that some people find troublesome is that you can bounce around between time periods, factions and characters. Now, that doesn't bother me, but for many, especially if you're just starting out, this can be confusing. So whilst I will say to people, well, you can just choose anywhere to begin getting into 40k, if you want to be more focused, then choosing an omnibus is the right way to go. And if you don't care either way, it doesn't matter, so you could still choose an omnibus. It's going to help keep your focus, and even if lots of other details and events are changing throughout the overarching plot, usually at least the characters will be there to carry you through. My first omnibus selection has to be a fairly obvious choice, but with fair reason. It is of course Abnett's Eisenhorn Trilogy, comprising of Xenos, Malleus and Hereticus. So many of us are going to know this story inside and out at this point, but it is a great choice still for newcomers to 40k who are looking for a very first investment in a wider 40k tale. Here's the spiel about the story arc. Inquisitor Gregor Eisenhorn, an Imperial Inquisitor, one of the tireless defenders of humanity. With his warband, he is going to scour the galaxy, walking in the shadows of darkness to root out heresy. Eisenhorn can truly rely on himself and himself alone to deal with the things he has to face, even if that means making deals with the enemy and compromising everything he has ever believed in. There's a good reason why this is a very well regarded series, and I can't recommend it enough. So you can pick up the Omnibus series. For Eisenhorn, it's a great one to begin with. My second choice is undoubtedly well known, but strangely I never see it mentioned especially often, which is surprising. It is of course the excellent Macharian Crusade Omnibus, comprising 3 books of Angel of Fire, Fist of Demetrius, Fall of Macharius. At the dawn of the 41st millennium, Lord Solar Macharius and his vast armies embark upon the reconquest of 1,000 worlds. Only Macharius, his will indomitable, has the strength of purpose and leadership to bring about such an immense undertaking, a crusade the like of which has not been seen since the dark days of the heresy, but the countless wars are all-consuming, devouring men and material, and soon even Macharius' trusted generals and advisors begin to question the feasibility of such a punishing and seemingly endless campaign. As the battlefront stretches across the length of the stars over 1,000 worlds, can Macharius hold his crusade together, or will it end in ignominy and flame? It is a very excellent collection. It's well worth reading, if not now, then at least putting on a list. Now lastly, and maybe with some controversy, I'm choosing the Night Lord's Omnibus over other options. And my reason for choosing this is, for one, it's not an Imperial loyalist thing, so it's good to have some other perspectives in there, but also within these books are some interesting details about the warp, and that is helpful for anybody at a moderately established level of understanding in 40k. It features again 3 books, Soul Hunter, Blood Reaver and Void Stalker. Here's the summary of it. Driven by their hatred of the false emperor, the Night Lords stalk the shadows of the galaxy, eternally seeking revenge for the death of their Primarch. Guided by the visions of the prophet Talos, a warband from this sinister legion struggles to survive in a constant war against the forces of the Imperium. But when they come into conflict with fellow renegades and are hunted by the Eldar of Craftworld All 3, the Night Lords find themselves returning to the scene of their greatest defeat and drawn into a battle they cannot possibly win. In truth, this summary doesn't do the series justice at all. It's an amazing insight into the workings of chaos and their outlook. It even touches on how the warp functions and will give you some further understanding of how and why those who align with the forces of chaos are such an abhorrent danger to the Imperium and humanity itself. Now I will just remind again, this video is purely to give some helpful advice for those who might feel a bit lost. There's obviously no right or wrong way to approach getting into reading 40k material. Quite honestly, if you were to just buy the tabletop rulebook, it has plenty of lore information in there itself, or indeed any of the codex books either. Ultimately, the most important thing is to find something that suits you and draws you further into wanting to read more and more, because there is a staggering amount of 40k books to get through and new material is constantly being created. I will lastly make mention of the current humble bundle of starter books in 40k, which is currently going on. The link is below. For just £1 you can get 6 books. The higher tier options open up some fantastic other choices like Talon of Horus, Ghost Warrior, Farsight, Ravener, to name but a few. I had actually stopped mentioning the humble sales because it was always the same books, but this is a different selection, a great selection of content, so I highly recommend getting it. However, it's basically only 24 hours to go at this point, and I'm adding this in as an extra piece of audio because annoyingly I wanted to get this out yesterday, the bloody internet crapped out and I couldn't get the video out. So you got 24 hours, I recommend you go and get it because it is a good deal. If you're watching this after the sale is finished in the future, I will say always keep an eye on Humble because they regularly have 40k ebook sales. I usually throw these up on my Twitter and community tab here on the channel. So follow me there if you want and check my community tab as and when. And I will say as well, guys, don't forget audiobooks are a great way to get into learning about the lore, especially if it's not so easy to get hold of physical books or you're not one for reading through tons and tons of ebooks. So I have put my Audible link down below. You can get one free audiobook with that right now. And Audible is good because they always have some of the newest books, things like Belisarius Call's great work, which I keep recommending to people because it is just such a great one. But as you saw in my recent video, loads of other selections as well. Beyond that, I would just say good reading to you guys, good luck. Please be sure to return and leave a comment letting me know how you got on with your choices. And yes, of course, undoubtedly in the comments, discuss away your own choices and why. Interested to see people's rationale as to why they chose a specific starting book beyond just a list of essentials. Please show your working. Okay, thank you for watching, thanks for supporting, as always to you guys. If you enjoyed, please drop a like and I'll see you in the next one.